Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Friday evening here in mid-May, and I'm joined tonight by Stephen Tolbert. Stephen, how are you? Deep into the night here as we go into the weekend.
What's up, Brad? Yeah, we weren't sure if we were going to have a game this evening. Started out with about an hour-long rain delay, and you and I were texting about exactly how long we were going to hold off on this thing, but it actually ended up working out pretty well. The weather held off, and it's obviously a lot better to wait all that time and finish up with a win. So that makes it a little easier to stay up late and do one of these, but I'm doing well, man.
It certainly does make it a little bit easier. You were looking at the radar, as was I. I was surprised how easy it was in a good way. The game actually happened tonight. Just so everybody knows, programming wise, this would often be Sean and Steven. Sean's taking care of some family stuff tonight. No big deal. That's why there's 4 of us. We're going to mix and match. And we should say at the top of the show, we want to encourage you to make us a place that you come back to regularly. Go ahead and subscribe to this podcast, Hammer Territory, anywhere you might find podcasts. That includes Apple and Spotify. We're also a part of the Foul Territory network of programs. Always happy to be a part of that program as we're getting started again in a new place. So go ahead and follow us and rate and review and tell your friends about the show. But for the most part, we'll dive into what was a nice win for the Braves. They've now won 3 games in a row. They had the mini sweep, which I chronicled in depth with Scott on Wednesday evening into Thursday, where they beat Boston twice in a row. And they get a 4-2 victory tonight over the Mets. Beyond the rain delay, all of the fireworks, and I actually mean all of the fireworks for the Braves offensively, happened in a 4-batter span in the 3rd inning. Now, it was a lot of fun, but it was 3 home runs in 4 batters with a walk in between and not a whole lot else. So, number one, Steven, I guess, that was fun, but what do you make of the rest of it? Is there any concern about, the offense still hasn't quite gotten it all together? There's been lots of talk about that, including on with you guys and with us and et cetera, et cetera. Even tonight, they got a win, but it wasn't like they scored 10 runs.
You definitely want to see more runs. You want to see more hits. I was looking it up before the game started. The last time the Braves had 10 hits in a game, not runs, 10 hits in a game was April 24th. So that was like 16 days ago, 17 days ago, over 2 weeks ago. The last time the Braves had 10 hits in a game, which is wild. I mean, this was the best offense of baseball last year, one of the best offenses we've ever seen. And they're having a hard time just stacking hits together. So yes, it's good to see that they, at least they were getting home runs tonight, right? It wasn't just singles, it was balls out of the ballpark. Ronnie hit one a mile. See Olsen get it, the monkey off his back. Ozzie snuck one over. That's great to see. It's great to see the power, but the offense is still not quite right. And I will say there was a lot of loud contact tonight. Like Ronnie should have probably had 4 hits tonight with the way he hit the ball. He had 1. So, if you squint, you can see it. Like you can start to see like the 2023 offense coming around, much better at bats. I think the top of the order is coming. I think the bottom of the order is probably going a little bit. Ironically, I'm more worried about the bottom of the order than I am the top for the first time this year, probably. So I guess that's a bit of a flip, but you can see it coming. Like the offense is coming. It's not there yet. We're still not to the point where, the full talent level of the team is showing itself, but better at bats. The top of the lineup looks like it's starting to see the ball better. And hopefully as we get into the warmer months, we start seeing a little bit of what last year was like.
Yeah, that's right. And I totally agree with you about the worry meter. It helps that the top of the order was responsible for those 4 runs and 4 batters tonight. You mentioned Ronald. Ronald's looking like the guy he used to be, which is obviously what you want to see. I was never worried that wouldn't happen, but he had an absolute tank of a home run. 461, I believe, was where it was measured at. 115-mile exit velocity, like an absolute blast in a throwback way. I believe I saw a stat that he is now 3 or 4 home runs clear of the field in all of baseball in the last 5 years on home runs of this distance or further. Like he is in this, along with it's like him and Aaron Judge basically that can hit the ball this far, which is a lot of fun. Of course, Ozzie follows that up, and then look, Matt Olson. I have been saying repeatedly that I'm not worried about Matt Olson. His StatCast profile looks good. He's hitting the ball hard, but he hasn't hit a home run in a month. And I'm not exaggerating. It's actually been a month. But he homered today, and that was good to see after, of course, he hit 54 a year ago. I don't think he's going to get to that number this year based on this start. But at the same time, Matt Olson is a proven, at the very least, 35, 40 home run hitter, and him kind of getting back on the horse, so to speak, with a long ball is encouraging, even if you weren't worried at all, like I wasn't.
Yeah, I think the broadcast said that it was the longest homerless streak of Olson's career. I think they said because
It's believable.
yeah, it's been over a month. Like you said, it was April 7th was the last time he hit a home run. So, yeah, that's wild. I mean, obviously that's wild for a guy who hit 54 home runs last year. But like you said, I mean, the Braves led the world in barreled outs for the first month. And Olson was part of that. Riley really is the one that paid for most of that, honestly. But just seeing Ronald hit 3 or 4 balls in the air tonight, hit him hard. That's good to see, obviously. So yeah, I mean, you don't worry. It is still April. We saw last year Marcell Ozuna had the worst April I think I've ever seen any hitter have, and then from that point on, he was like prime A-Rod. So it happens. Like guys have bad Aprils now. Obviously, the Braves had a bunch of guys have a bad April, and really, to be fair, it was really the last 2 weeks of April. They really started out pretty well.
Yeah.
But the offense is coming, and if those 4 guys, if Acuna, Ozzy, Riley, Olson, if those guys just hit at their level, not even like superstar level, just like their average level, the Braves are going to be fantastic. I mean, the Braves are going to win probably 90 plus games just off of that alone. Now, if any of them even goes above and beyond that, it could be even better. But that's how much talent this team has. They don't need anybody to go crazy. Just if everybody hits their level, this team is going to be fine. So yeah, it's good to see. It's not like we were ever fully worried about it, but it is still nice to see.
My favorite go-to stat for Matt Olson has been that even coming into tonight, so before the home run, he was 97th percentile in exit velocity this year and 96th percentile in hard hit rate. So like he was never going to be what he has been so far.
Yeah.
The data does not support him struggling to the level he's been struggling so far, and we saw a little bit of a glimpse of that this evening. You mentioned a little bit of the worry at the bottom of the order. I wanted to tee up a little bit. Michael Harris is in the midst of quite an ugly stretch. And I know you've been observing some things there. So, what are you making of this? Because he's near the bottom of the order. There's been talk about him hitting behind Arcia, all that stuff too. But he is as cold as Olson was for a while, as cold as Riley was for a while. Harris is having the worst stretch that I think anybody in the lab's had so far this year.
Well, Harris's struggles are more concerning to me than Riley, Olson, or Acuna's ever were because Harris's struggles are more process based. And what I mean by that is if you look at the profile he's running, and I talked about this a lot about a month ago, but at the time when I was talking about it, Harris was still having a pretty good start. He got off to a really decent start to the year. And so people got very mad at me for pointing this out, and a lot
I,
of
I
a
believe
lot
you.
of a lot of angry tweets that I can't repeat on air. But he's consistently running this profile where he is chasing everything. He is swinging at everything. Colin McHugh, who did a fantastic job on the broadcast tonight, by the way, pointed this out tonight. But he's running the highest swing rate of his career. He's running one of the highest chase rates of. He's just swinging at it like he's just swinging at everything. And the problem,
I have a stat for you, by the way. He
go
is
for it.
currently first percentile in baseball in chase rate.
Yeah.
First percentile, and that's the bad way. You don't want to that's not that you want to be 100th percentile, not first. First
Right.
percentile is very bad.
Right. He's at the bottom, basically. And listen, and this is why I was talking about this earlier in the year, is because there is a whole like Javi Baez career path that you want absolutely nothing to do with. Like you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't fix this problem, if you don't stop chasing pitches that are not strikes, then pitchers just stop throwing you strikes. And when pitchers stop throwing you strikes, you're done. Like if you're not taking walks off those pitches, then why would they ever throw you a pitch in the strike zone? And people have always looked at Michael's K rate and said, well, it's not a bad K rate. Like he's fine there. But the problem is Michael's really good at making contact at those awful pitches below the zone, which is why he runs like a 60% ground ball rate for his career. So no, he's not swinging and missing like Baez does. He's making contact on them, but it's awful contact. It's contact that's never going to lead to any sort of production. And so this is the worry with him, and it is a worry. It's again, this is the raw data. This is in his profile. This is not just results based or a product of small sample theater. This is a real issue for him, and he's got to figure it out. He's got to figure out a way to not swing it at terrible pitches because when you do that, it's almost impossible to be good. I mean, go online, go to Savant or Fangraphs, wherever, and sort. Go to like the chase stat, or I think Fangraphs calls it like O swing, and sort by the guys who do it the most and by the guys who do it the least. And the guys who do it the least, you'll see Juan Soto, Mookie Betts, Aaron Judge, like you'll see the best hitters in baseball on that list of guys who just do not swing at bad pitchers. Acuna's on that list too. He does not swing at bad pitches. And if you go and sort it by the guys who do it the most, that is not a list you want to be on. And that is where Michael is, and it has been for a lot of his career. And this is just something he's got to fix because pitchers will make you pay for this over and over and over again if it's not something you fix. And it's a big part of his profile right now.
I am with you 100% on that. This year has been even more pronounced. I gave that first percentile stat. He's, again, this is coming into the night on Baseball Savant slash StatCast. He had a 45% chase rate, which is just absurdly high. For some context, he's always been high to your point, and you're 100% right about this. But even, coming into the year, is the last 2 years, it was like in the high 30s, 38, 39%, which was still bad, but it was like, seventh percentile, eighth percentile, like still not where you want to be, but not quite as comical as it's been so far. So it's going the wrong way, which is not what you want to see for a young player. Of course, he's been able to hit at a high level in his first two full seasons, not star level production at the plate, but star level overall production when you combine what his value's been on the base paths and especially in the outfield at a premium position in center field. So like, as we've all said numerous times, he doesn't have to be an elite bat to be a very, very good player, but it is going to be hard. It would be hard for anyone to keep up any level of average production swing as often as he has this year in a still small sample size this year, but given all the history, it's going to be hard for him to kind of get to where we all hope that he can be. Because I know I was calling him as a potential breakout guy this year, even in comparison to where he's already been, which is already a really good player. But I mean, if all I told you, Stephen, was that he was going to have this chase rate, that basically on its own eliminates most of his high end outcomes offensively. It's that big. It's that big of a problem because you just cannot be what you would need to be as an overall hitter when you're swinging at this many bad pitches.
When people will point to, he's had decent years and has had a chase rate that's not been great both years. And that
Yeah,
is true. But like you said, it's worse
it's
this
getting
year,
worse.
first of all. And second of all, like Javi Baez had a couple of really good years with Chicago early in his career. Like you can fake it for a while, like because pitchers are still going to throw you strike. Like it takes a little while for pitchers to fully understand that you're going to swing at everything. And so there's literally no point in throwing you strikes. Like Mike's still seeing a decent amount of strikes, but that number will just go down and down and down and down and down. And if you are not walking, if you are allowing pitchers to get you out by throwing pitches out of the zone consistently, that's all you'll ever see because there's no reason to throw a ball over the plate if you're going to swing at everything. And that's what's going to slowly happen to Michael, like it slowly happened to Baez, where just pitchers just kept going further and further away, further and further down. Now, I will say it's a little easier for Mike because he's left-handed, and there's not as many left-handed pitchers that can, throw a sweeping slider off the plate. I mean, Javi Baez's career has basically been ruined by the fact that he can't lay off sliders off the plate, which is obviously what every right-hander throws him. And there's not as many left-handers in the game to do that to Michael. So it's not as easy to do that to a left-handed hitter, but every single pitcher he faces has a pitch that can go somewhere below the zone. And that's his Achilles heel right now. Anything below the zone he's swinging at. And if he hits it at all, it's just a ground ball. And maybe it's a hit and people, get excited when it's a hit, but it's not good process. And it's not going to lead to great results unless he fixes. You just got to take that pitch. And that's the next step for him. He's got to take that pitch.
It's a good way to think about it. It's something for people to watch who are maybe not always like in the absolute super into the numbers and all the approach stuff, but it's a pretty obvious thing to kind of just take a step back and be like, all right, pay attention to whether Michael Harris is swinging at bad pitches. It's
Yeah.
that simple in some ways.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on that for sure because he's in the midst of this downturn. Even with his peripherals, he's not going to have one hit. He has one hit since April 27th. Like I think it's like one of his last 32. Like it wouldn't be this bad even with that number, but it's just something to keep an eye on for the future. Other than that, tonight, I mean, on Friday, as we're recording this, the other big story was Charlie Morton, who was just very, very good. Once again, he threw 7 innings with 3 hits, 7 strikeouts, 1 walk, missed a lot of bats, Charlie's now sitting with a 3.14 ERA for the year, 99 pitches. Like him eating innings was important too, and a busy week for the Braves coming up. I thought he looked really good again. I know I'm kind of known as the Morton guy, but objectively, he's just done his job very well this year.
Every time he has a good game, I think of Brad Rowland. Honestly, it's to that point where like you've been the it's like Kyle Wright with Scott. Like you've been the guy because there's been times last year, there were times the year before, there were times where he hasn't looked the best,
He's
and
40 years
people
old. He's 40 years
right
old, Stephen.
and people have gotten loud about the fact that maybe it's time for him to hang it up, and then inevitably you look up at the end of the year and he's got an ERA in the three, a FIP in the threes, and they re-up it for another year. And same thing this year. After tonight, he's got an ERA in the three, he's got a FIP in the threes. He just keeps on chugging. He passed 2,000 career innings tonight, which is a heck of an accomplishment for any pitcher. But yeah, I mean, he looked great. I mean, fastball, he's always been able to hold the velocity, still throwing 95, 96. Struck out the side in the first. The Braves gave him that 4-0 lead. And I think he set down, I think he gave up one hit, but immediately got a double play. I think like 12, I think he went 12 for 12 in the next, the 12 hitters to get outs. Once the Braves gave him a 4-0 lead, which is huge, obviously, to that many shutdown innings in a row. Didn't give up any damage till the seventh, where he gave up the leadoff homer to Lindor. And then the bullpen came in and shut it down. But yeah, he looked fantastic. The starting pitching has just been, this is probably a whole podcast we could do. We're not going to do tonight, but starting pitching has been absurd. During this offensive downturn, the team is still 23-12, in large part because the starting rotation has been just ridiculous. And one or two runs a night, it seems like every night, and just giving everybody the best chance to win the game. So kudos to Morton. Another great game. And, he makes you look good every time he does it because you've been the guy that's been ringing that bell for the last 2 years.
I'm often wrong, and maybe Charlie will cool off, but it has been fun to watch. And yeah, we all understand he's 40 years old. It's not you can't rely. I mean, even I will raise my hand and say that you can't rely on this. I would have projected him to be a little bit worse than this so far, and maybe he can do this again at age 40. But so far, that ERA in the low threes, FIP and xFIP in the mid threes, like that's an excellent, especially when he is your fourth starter or whatever it's supposed to be right now, with the way Lopez
Yeah.
is pitching, with the way Sale is pitching, obviously with the way Fried has pitched at times this year. Like you're in a luxurious place, and you're right. We won't do it now, but there's a lot of words to be said about the way that they have pitched in the rotation since a kind of a slow start. Of course, then the slow start plus the loss of Strider, it was like, okay, a little bit of fear happening here, and then ever since then, basically, it's been absolute like lights out from everybody other than the fifth spot, which is rotated. But that's kind of what fifth spots do. I know we won't do that competition either because Scott and I spent a lot of time on that the other day. But fifth spots are just kind of what they are, man. That's kind of how I feel about that. But if your top four are good, that's kind of all that matters to me.
Yeah, and it's been, it's almost immediately after it happened, like is immediately when Strider went down, and when the offense kind of started being a little shaky, like everybody just locked in. And I can't remember the last time, one of the big four guys, Max, Sale, Ronaldo, or Morton had a bad game. Honestly, I can't even tell you off the top of my. I watch every
No,
game.
it really hasn't happened. I mean, there've been like end of starts where like maybe a little bit it gets a little bit loose, like Lopez the other day when he lost his command at the very end in the sixth inning or whatever it was. But I think the last time the Braves had a bad start, other than the fifth spot, which was Elder had one, of course, in LA, Vines had one, but like yeah, I mean it might be a full month now
It's been
since
a
they've had
month. I
an
think it's been a
actual bad
month.
start. Yeah, I mean from a guy who was one of those top four. So yeah, it's not sustainable. Like they're not going to be this incredibly consistent all year long. But I think that if you put this top four, again, knock on wood, healthy, it's crazy to say without Strider, but this is still I don't want to call it elite, maybe, but it might be elite, that top four at the moment with the way they're pitching.
I talked about this with Sean. Hand up, man. I did not see Ronaldo Lopez being this good.
Me either.
I saw, I liked the Chris Sale deal. I was a little scared because of the injury history. He's been unbelievable. Max got off to that slow start. Nobody really worries about him. And then Charlie just keeps on keeping on. The one thing I'll say about Charlie, and it's relevant obviously because he pitched tonight, but he is 40 years old, but his arm is not 40 years old, if that makes sense. Like he was a late starter in his career. Like he really wasn't he kind of reinvented himself when he got to Houston, and he pitched for the Pirates, he pitched for the Braves early in his career. Really wasn't very good. He didn't pitch a lot. He doesn't have that typical like ton and tons and tons and tons and tons of innings on his arm like a typical 40-year-old would. He was kind of a late starter, so he might be able to go a little deeper than your average 40-year-old.
He was awesome tonight, and that was very helpful after the offense kind of cooled off following that big inning. But it was smooth sailing from there, and a third straight victory to kind of silence or at least quiet some of the what I would say were pretty funny murmurs from earlier this week and the last week about how this team was in need of a shakeup or whatever it was going to be. Now they're winning games again, and it's pretty quiet around here. The other big story, though, Stephen, from the last 2 days, in fact, we were called several times on social media for an emergency podcast, mostly in jest, I think. But there was this combination of trades that happened to kind of swap backup middle infielders. First, Luis Guillorme getting traded to the Angels for either cash or a player to be named later. Of course, Guillorme was not around for very long. It was a 1 year cheap deal. He only played in a game once since April 24th. So basically, he was playing when Ozzie was out, and then he's kind of gone into obscurity, which wasn't super shocking, but that's kind of what happened there. It looked briefly like it was going to be David Fletcher time for the Braves, but then literally within hours, they acquired Zach Short from Boston for cash. He had been DFA'd by the Red Sox, but he's kind of had a weird route this year. He was with the Mets. He was traded to Boston like 10 days ago. He's another kind of anonymous utility guy, backup, rough hitting infielder, very similar to Guillorme. So, like, I know you may joke about this, like, about there's not really much to say, but is there anything to say here? Like, I've seen some pretty funny opinions and theories on this, but it feels like it's kind of a shrug to me.
Yeah, you could put a gun to my head. I'm not sure I could come up with an interesting take on swapping out.
I had to ask you. I mean, it's two in-season trades in one day, basically. It's like, all right, this is content for us.
The one thing I'll say, and we talked about this a lot in spring training, and this is something I thought, and I'm going to be 100% honest, this is why I thought the Guillorme signing was weird to begin with, is, one thing we talked about a lot in spring is when you're talking about your backup infielder, the most important function is can they play shortstop, right? Because you have to have somebody that can play shortstop if your guy gets hurt.
Yep.
And so, when they signed Guillorme, who is typically not a shortstop, he's more of a second base, third base guy. Everybody was kind of like, this is weird. Like, this doesn't really fit. And then over spring training, they had him out at shortstop quite a bit. He looked decent. So I guess they were fine with it. What they said what Snicker said the other day when he was asked about the deal was, the thing with, ironically, his name is Zach Short. The thing with Zach Short is he can play short. He can play shortstop. And that's the whole reason they got him. And that makes sense to me. Um, you know, I guess I don't really understand why they just didn't do that in the offseason when they needed a backup infielder, but whatever. So yeah, I mean, he's never going to play just like every other bench player on this team. And, if you ever see him, that means somebody either got hurt or somebody needs to be pinch run for. But yeah, he can play shortstop, I think is the reason. Other than that, yeah, I don't have much.
Yeah, I mean, there's this temptation to give all kinds of theories. That is a pretty good one, I think. The only counter would be like, why wouldn't they? And this is a question I was asked, like, why wouldn't they just give David Fletcher that job? And that's a reasonable thing to say. I think that it wouldn't bother me if they did. I think that maybe they want a little bit of depth there, and Fletcher is in the minors, and they can kind of plug that 40-man spot while keeping him around. But I think that if you ask me to give a strong opinion whether it was Zach Short or David Fletcher is going to be better in that role, I don't have one for you. So maybe it's as simple as just like having two guys instead of one in case something happens weird. Because if Arcia gets hurt, I mean, they don't. Ozzie can't play there anymore. That was, of course, a pet theory from years ago about him playing shortstop. Those days are long gone. He can't play there. So, like, maybe it's just they want to have two guys if Arcia goes down, and that way they have a backup. But other than that, it's like Zach Short versus David Fletcher. I don't really. It's not that I don't care. It's that I don't think it's hugely impactful in the moment.
Yeah, and there's a whole fascinating conversation. We're not going to do it tonight, but there's like a whole fascinating conversation. Like if Arcia went down for like a long time, for years they had Von Grissom down there at least as a stopgap, but they don't really even have that. And
They got Nacho, man.
they got
Ready.
Nacho. And honest to God, it might be Nacho.
I'm not
If
kidding. I mean, I think that if something happened to Arcia for 3 months right now, they would either promote Nacho pretty quickly, or they would trade for somebody.
Yeah. Is Nacho this shows how much I follow the minor leagues. Is Nacho in double A or is he in
He is
triple A?
currently in Double A,
Double A.
and
Okay.
he's very young. And I'm planning to have someone more prospect focused than any of us are on the show pretty soon. But that kind of came up in the middle of this. I saw some of the smarter prospect guys like, "Hey, Nacho's not far away." It's like, well, yeah, and maybe they don't. Well, that's another reason why they may not care too much about that spot beyond Arcia. Because look, Arcia has done an incredible job. He's doing just fine, and they're not worried about shortstop in the short term. It's just a depth thing. But yeah, it was. I think everybody can probably tell by our tone, like this is not the most impactful series of moves. It's just that it happened on an off day, which always puts a little bit more shine on things. And it was literally two trades of major leaguers in one day, and that's just something that doesn't often happen in May.
And I think both deals were for a cash consideration. Like the
Yeah,
Braves traded the
Diorme is a player to be named later or cash, so we don't know yet, but it's probably going to be cash, and the short deal is cash. So yeah.
yeah. And the Angels are, I mean, God bless Ron Washington. I don't yeah. The Braves are going to show up to the clubhouse one day and Ron Washington is just going to be standing there with his bags because of
I
the
mean,
mess that
Guillaume,
he
yeah, there. I'm sure. I think it was you. Somebody made note or made fun of the lineup the Angels ran out there the other day, where they announced their lineup like I literally mean it was like 10 minutes before first pitch.
yeah.
It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Like their beat guys were like, "There's no lineup," and like people, the crowd is there. Like they're doing like all the initial pregame stuff that you do in the stadium. That's like on schedule. That lasts like 30 minutes before a game. If you've never been to a game on a regular basis, it's like it's the same schedule. Like for, national anthem and the same like ads, all that stuff is kind of all happening, and they didn't have a lineup.
No
It was
lineup.
it
Yeah.
was just the weirdest thing I've ever seen. But Guillaume, look, isn't a bad player. Like he's not a great hitter, but to answer the big question of why, I think the hopefully the most natural explanation is exactly what you said. It's just they probably trust short to play more short,
Yeah.
and that's kind of it. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, other than that, Stephen, I guess we could just mention that Pierce Johnson seems to be a little bit closer than expected. That's
Oh
another
yeah.
that's
Yeah,
that's
that would
probably good to at least note. Snicker said that today. He's already throwing off the mound, or he's close to it. That's a huge boon if that's real. Like, I mean, anytime you get an elbow inflammation, it's like a little bit scary. You never want to speculate, but it's like he could be out for any length of time that you want to guess. But it seems like it might be a pretty short stint for him, and that's huge if that's real.
yeah. I think it was either you or Scott on the last show, I think, talking about like um the shortage of right-handers in the bullpen.
No, Scott, yeah.
Yeah, if Pierce Johnson's not there, like it's Iglesias, it's Joe Jimenez, and then it's like the next guy is like Jesse Chavez. Like it
And then
gets
I mean, people were clamoring for Ken Giles, like clamoring for Ken Giles.
yeah, and that's not a good if you're clamoring for Ken Giles, you are not in a good spot. So yeah, if Pierce Johnson is gonna avoid a serious injury, I'm not gonna anything can happen, of course, with an elbow. So
Yes,
I'm not
it's still an if until he's pitching again. It's still an if. It's just that there's a little bit of good news. That's all we're saying, right?
yeah, and even after he's pitching again, it's still an if.
Also
But
true. It's any pitcher can break until they
right.
don't.
So, but yeah, if they get him back in relatively short order, I mean, I need to write something on him because I don't think he gets enough attention. He's been unbelievable since the Braves acquired him. And he's a fantastic high leverage reliever. So yeah, that would be huge if that's a minor injury.
Yeah, and again, that's all we know right now is that he was getting closer, or at least was about to pitch off of a mound. But even that in itself means that they didn't have to shut him down for a long time. In contrast, Tyler Matzik is shut down right now, which is not out of the norm. Like we speculated, it might not be great. I don't. We just don't know how hurt he is. I know you said the same thing with Sean. But with Matzik, he actually is just not pitching right now. They've
Yeah.
shut him down, and that's normal. But it's also a little bit scary. We'll see. But that contrast, while not great for Matzik, is encouraging to some degree on Johnson because anytime you go on the IL, it's like, all right, what's going on here? And him pitching, or at least throwing a little bit this soon is good.
Yeah. And the bullpen has been fantastic. I mean, Jesse Chavez, I don't know how he does it. I
FIP of
looked this.
5, ERA of 1
Oh
5.
my God. I don't, we need to study this man. We need to study this man. I don't know how he does it, but he keeps doing it. He came in a tie game the other day in the seventh inning and got a 1-2-3 inning and the Braves went on to win the game. So God
in,
bless him.
in 13 innings this year, he has like a 1.5 strikeout to walk rate. It's like not what you want at all. The peripherals are really ugly. His strand rate's super high. Like he's been lucky so far, like objectively, so you can't really argue with that. But again, every time he's in Atlanta, he just has the ERA in the twos. I
Yeah,
don't
it
understand
doesn't
it.
matter. It doesn't matter. It's just
Currently he has negative WAR on Fangraphs with a 1.35 ERA, which is the funniest thing I've ever seen.
it's like impossible. It's like
Yeah.
impossible to do. But yeah, the
Uh,
bullpen. I mean, the bullpen has been so good. Honestly, the whole pitching staff has been fantastic, even with the injuries. So yeah, if they get Pierce Johnson back, Alex is always going to add something at the deadline in the bullpen. He always does. But yeah, if they get Pierce back, Aaron Bummer's been a lot better than I think a lot of people think he's been. Ray Kerr looked really good his first outing. So bullpen's been fantastic. If they get Johnson back, that's still a really strong group.
It definitely is. Um, that's kind of all we got on this Friday evening into Saturday. The Braves had two more with the Mets on Saturday and on Sunday. Saturday is Max Fried against Christian Scott, and Christian Scott's second career start, I believe, after he pitched pretty well earlier. I guess it was last week now at this point. And then it's Elder versus Severino listed on Sunday in prime time. We will not do the Elder conversation now, but they are not skipping him. He is in line to pitch on Sunday, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Steve, anything else you want to plug or get off your chest before we get out of here? Because the weekend is here and plenty more baseball to come.
No, yeah, beat the Mets. It's always fun to beat the Mets. The Braves did not have a good series against the Mets the first round, so
No,
that's when I think Yorme gave up a few runs in that game, which just tells you how that
yeah,
game.
it became 16-4, and that was perhaps the thing that I will remember the most about the Guillermo era was him pitching in that game.
Yeah, which tells you everything you need to know. But yeah, good to see Ronnie hit a ball a mile. Good to see Olson hit a homer. Hopefully, it's starting to turn a little bit for the top of the lineup because if it does, then this team's already going to be very good. Listen, this team's going to make the playoffs no matter what. But if those guys hit the way they should hit, then this team at least goes to being a lot more fun to watch.
It absolutely does. And as always, slash as often at least, we'll have a full breakdown of this series at the end of the weekend. I will be planning to be joined by Scott Coleman in our our traditional Sunday evening slot. We'll have more from Stephen and Sean Coleman coming up very soon. Stephen, where can folks follow you on Twitter if they have not done that already?
Yeah, B_outliers. If you don't follow me on Twitter, I still write for Battery Power for Chris over at Battery Power. So you can come check that out. I think it's one of the best blogs in all of sports, to be honest with you.
It
So,
certainly is.
but yeah, and we appreciate all the love. Again, a lot of people came over from Battery Power, listened to this show. Just unbelievably grateful for the response and reaction we've gotten to this new show. So we very, very much appreciate it. It does not go unnoticed.
Yes, definitely. Well said. Please go ahead and subscribe to this podcast anywhere you find podcasts. Again, Spotify, Apple, Overcast, etc. Leave 5-star ratings and reviews, especially on Apple and Spotify. Those are very, very helpful, helping us to spread the word to other people. But also, this is honestly the biggest thing that you can do to support a podcast, other than subscribing to it and checking out the sponsors, is to use your word of mouth. Your family and friends that are Braves fans, if they have not heard of us or whatever, please share this show with them. Hopefully they will like it. But even if they don't like it, have them check it out, so maybe they'll give us a chance once or twice, and hopefully they'll latch on from there. So thanks for listening, everybody. Really do appreciate it. Thanks to Stephen for allowing me to sit in with him on this Friday evening, and we'll see you guys next time.